What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Makhachev issues challenge to Michael Chandler. Ahead of Makhachev's highly anticipated showdown with Charles Oliveira for the undisputed lightweight title later this month in Abu Dhabi, many critics have continued to question whether or not Khabib Nurmagomedov's protege is worthy of a title shot. As detractors have pointed out, Makhachev has yet to beat a top 5 fighter in the lightweight division. Although his UFC career so far has been a dominant one, without high-profile names on his resume, many feel his title shot hasn't been earned. Given that, it's no surprise that the potential champion is taking potential challengers more serious than most. Today, the potential champion issued a challenge to former Bellator MMA champion Michael Chandler, who is confident that his upcoming fight with Dustin Poirier will determine the #1 contender at 155 pounds. In a recent tweet, Makhachev pointed out that although Chandler is coming off a spectacular KO win, it was against Tony Ferguson, who is in the midst of a 5-fight losing streak. If Makhachev wins the lightweight title in October, Iron Mike will likely have to defeat a streaking young contender before earning a shot at his belt. Of course, as many Twitter users were quick to point out, the tweet likely came from Makhachev's manager Ali Abdelaziz, who was notorious for tweeting from his fighters' accounts. In fact, former UFC welterweight champion Kamaru Usman once went as far as to encourage other fighters managed by Abdelaziz to take back control of their accounts. Do you think these stars will align for a Makhachev-Chandler bout? Give us your thoughts in the comment section down below. Alexander Volkanovski set as backup fighter for Oliveira-Makhachev fight. This just in, UFC featherweight kingpin Alexander Volkanovski has been tapped to be the backup fighter in the event Charles Oliveira or Makhachev is unable to compete on October 22nd in Abu Dhabi. With less than 2 weeks to go until the two men are set to collide inside the octagon for the lightweight championship, the news of Volkanovski stepping in as the backup fighter is massive news. It had previously been reported that Beneil Dariush, who is set to fight Mateusz Gamrot on the same card, would be the backup fighter for the main event bout. However, Volkanovski has now been medically cleared after injuring his hand in his UFC 276 win over Max Holloway. Fortunately, with the 145-pound champ good to go, we could very well now see history made at UFC 280 if Volkanovski steps in on short notice and becomes champ. During a recent YouTube video, the champ spoke about the opportunity and his desire to cement his legacy by earning champ status.
Yeah, we're locked in as a backup fighter. I've been calling for it. I said I wanted it. Just had to make sure the hand was all good. So we all good. We locked in. We got the clearance to fight. The UFC's on board. Everyone's on board. So I'll be at UFC 280 to make weight. And looking forward to it.
On the heels of a chaotic UFC 279 fight week that saw more than half of the main event cards reshuffled at the 11th hour, fans are well aware of the fact that anything can happen during fight week. If for any reason Alexander Volkanovski steps in at UFC 280, it could be argued that the fight becomes even more intriguing. Since joining the UFC in 2016, Volkanovski has remained undefeated, rattling off 12 straight wins while defending the featherweight title 4 times. In his video, Volkanovski also stated that if the main event goes on as scheduled and his services aren't needed, then at least he can fight the winner of the Charles Oliveira-Makhachev bout at a later date. That of course contradicts what former title challenger Michael Chandler believes, which is that he will earn a title fight with a win over Dustin Poirier later this year. At the same time, Beneil Dariush is waiting in the wings for his own potential title fight. Needless to say, it will be thrilling to see how things shake out at 155 pounds over the coming months. Aljamain Sterling and Petr Yan seemingly squash beef ahead of UFC 280. With both bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling and former champion Petr Yan on Fight Island ahead of their respective UFC 280 fights, many thought things could get ugly between the two bitter rivals. After Yan illegally kneed Sterling in the first bantamweight title defense, the Funk Master became the 135-pound champion. For months, the two fired verbal shots at one another in the media, leading up to their highly anticipated rematch at UFC 273. When the two men met in the octagon a year later, Sterling picked up a split decision win. With Sterling now set to defend his title against TJ Dillashaw on October 22nd in Abu Dhabi, and Yan set to fight Sean O'Malley in a potential #1 contender fight, many thought the rivalry would be alive and well. This week, the duo surprised fans when they appeared in a video on Fight Island having a casual conversation before then shaking hands and going their separate ways. In the caption, Sterling hinted at a future trilogy fight, while fans in their replies were shocked by the two men seemingly squashing their beef. Considering how heated of a rivalry the two had, it's both shocking and awesome to see them share a moment of respect with one another. Whether or not the peace between the two survives a potential trilogy, of course, remains to be seen. And before we continue, make sure you give that like button some love and be sure to subscribe to the MMA Zone for all of the latest news. Sean Strickland takes aim at Ronda Rousey in Instagram video. UFC middleweight Sean Strickland has a knack for making headlines. The brash middleweight never shies away from sharing his unfiltered thoughts, no matter how controversial they may be. Whether it's on the mic leading up to a fight or in a candid video posted to social media, you never know what you're going to get out of Sean Strickland. Ahead of his rebooked fight with former title challenger Jaron Cannonier on December 17th, Strickland took aim at former women's bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey in an Instagram video. Over the course of his rant, the perennial contender referred to a quote from Rousey from many years ago after she was brutally knocked out by Holly Holm, where she admitted to having suicidal thoughts in the wake of the defeat. The way Strickland sees things, suicidal thoughts aren't fleeting things that cross your mind. They're a permanent thing that stays with someone their entire life. He spoke in a video after filming an episode of Food Truck Diaries with Brendan Schaub, admitting that he's too unfiltered for a podcast because he speaks without thinking. In the video posted to his Instagram, Strickland can be seen referencing Ronda Rousey's appearance on the Ellen DeGeneres show, where she talked about her own suicidal thoughts, saying,
"I don't know when suicide became cool. It became cool. Like, they made a Netflix show, 13 Reasons. Everybody's depressed. Everybody is suicidal. And let me tell you guys, it is not cool. It is not cool. Depression is like cancer. It's terminal. It's like herpes. It's like herpes. You might not have it, but you always have it. And it's waiting to come out."
Unsurprisingly, the comments weren't incredibly well received by the MMA community, who pointed out that you can never tell what someone is really going through. At the same time, others were quick to point out how questioning the seriousness of someone's suicidal thoughts is an incredibly slippery slope. With Strickland's fight with Cannonier right around the corner, expect media members to ask him about his controversial comments during a media scrum or an official Q&A. And now for our breaking news story of the day, we have Alexei Oleinik released from the UFC. He had 4 losses in his last 5 fights and is 45 years old. What do you think about the UFC releasing Oleinik? Do you think this was a fair departure? Last up, Hasbulla will corner Aljamain against Charles Oliveira. Hasbulla-Magomedov has the fight game in the palm of his hand. The viral teenage sensation has continued to make headlines and dominate MMA Twitter in recent months as he's gone on somewhat of a media tour. From meeting Shaquille O'Neal to smashing a burger into the face of UFC featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski, Hasbulla has done it all this year. Several weeks ago, we learned that Hasbulla would be in attendance at UFC 280, where his neighbor, Aljamain, would be fighting for the vacant lightweight title. In addition, the UFC was planning to have Bruce Buffer announce Hasbulla in front of the Abu Dhabi crowd. Now, however, it sounds as though Hasbulla is going to play an even bigger part in the event. According to Aljamain's manager Ali Abdelaziz, Hasbulla will be one of the 3 men in Aljamain's corner for the pivotal bout. At the present time, UFC fighters are allowed to have 4 total cornermen for the fight, with 1 man being the cut man. Between rounds, only a total of 3 men are allowed inside the octagon, including the cut man, while the final corner member remains outside of the cage and offers instruction through the fence. While there has been no word yet as to whether or not Hasbulla will be one of the 2 coaches entering the cage between rounds alongside the cut man, or if he will remain outside the cage, his presence alone is enough to garner significant interest. With less than 2 weeks to go until Charles Oliveira and Aljamain set foot inside the octagon for a highly anticipated showdown, 2 things are certain. UFC 280 will be a night for the ages, and Hasbulla-Magomedov will without question be one of the most talked about people in the entire arena. Thanks so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all of the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.